$174,311. That is at the existing millage rate of 3.2925. Overall, that budget's increasing by 3.1 million or 4.38% for 2017. The general fund as a separate piece of the budget is, which is funded by the property taxes and other revenues to the county. The general fund alone is increasing by 2.9% to a total now of $44,936,000. Again, the same millage does not include a county millage increase. Some of the categories I've highlighted in the summary here are the child welfare expenses, and some of these are categories that I covered last year. There was a lot more detail and depth last year having to do with the millage increase, some of the explanations for that. This year I'm just highlighting some of the expenses we're seeing that are increasing and continue to increase, and those being first child welfare expenses. While the county's share of those child welfare expenses is going down because we have had good success in getting more and more state funding out of the Department of Human Services with a lot of help from our Children and Youth Director, Jim Holtree. So while the county's share of that is going down, the overall cost of these services is going up by 11.5% or $918,000. Those are attributable to the costs of placement for juveniles in secure and foster care, and as well as the hiring of additional children and youth staff due to the Child Protective Service laws that have been changed, otherwise known as the Sandusky laws. We are seeing an increase to the county in the cost of operating the court system, simply because the Commonwealth has decided to cut the reimbursement to the counties for the funding for the courts. That's known as Act 17, and that's being cut by 34%. That was a $100,000 cut to the county that we simply have to pick up. The state is not covering any longer.
And may I just interrupt you? We also had a similar experience with Area Agency on Aging, where in the past assessments were fully reimbursed. Now we have the $180,000 surprise that we have to use local, funds in order to do those assessments. So it's almost $300,000 now that's been transferred down to the local taxpayer, and they're mandated but not funded, and that's a continuing experience. We being at the end of the food chain on this funding program, it all impacts on what we can afford to do for our employees and our taxpayers when you have a $300,000 surprise like that.
Right, and those are just two examples of large chunks. Some of the other struggles are that the state may just provide flat funding and no increase, and that has happened for year over year, where our agencies are getting flat funded while our costs, primarily in wages, are going up. The prison budget prison's had a consistent population of about 550 inmates. This is the largest operation of the county general fund at $9.8 million. As we've talked about, and we'll talk about a little bit later in this meeting, there's a plan to open a day reporting center in Lebanon County in 2017, and the intention is that will decrease the number of those incarcerated at the prison, thereby decreasing the need for overtime wages and a reduction in the prison's cost.
Medical.
And in medical and others. Some of those reductions are already built into the prison's budget this year. Even with those built in, the budget is going up for the prison by 2.5%, again to $9.8 million. 80% of that operation is wages. So it's manpower.
And with the high turnover of corrections officers, we just saw some that bumped up to $13 an hour for one of the most difficult jobs that society has to offer. So it's not the fact that 80% of 9 million is a big number, but it's still, they're not certainly overpaid at that rate. I also want to mention that the warden has done a very good job. Dollar-wise, he's curbed his overtime in this fiscal year by about $40,000. So that's a trend that he's reversed. The sheriff has also participated in the overtime reduction, as has the DA's office with central booking. So those are three that are going in the right direction in terms of overtime, year to date.
Next highlight I have is the pension fund contribution. The annual required contribution, or the ARC as we know it, to the pension fund will again be fully paid for. And this is the fourth consecutive year that this is being funded, and the intention is to continue this, obviously. In 2017, the cost of the ARC will be $3.4 million. The last three payments of the ARC, along with the deposit of $10 million, which was reported, have brought the pension fund to a funded level of 83%. And when we get our next actuarial report sometime in March or April, I expect that would be even a little bit higher at that point. So the pension is definitely going in the right direction. Debt service.
From below 70%.
Yeah, back just three years ago, we were at 69 or 70% funded, so that's a good achievement. Debt service, debt payments are down by 5% coming in 2017. That's due in part to a refinancing of the 2011 bond to take advantage of the lower bond rates and that bond being callable, and as well as paying down some of the principal from the 2011 bond that was attributable to Cedar Haven. And with Cedar Haven no longer being owned by the county, we couldn't carry that debt any longer in principal and had to be paid down. County's debt right now is somewhere in the neighborhood of $18 million, which is a very low per capita debt ratio for counties of our size, and all counties, frankly. We're in a very good position in terms of debt. Relative to the general fund, that's a good number. Salary increases for 2017, non-union being 3%. The rest are all bargaining unit. The court-related bargaining unit, which is represented by the Teamsters, is still currently in arbitration. That's coming up on 2 years since that contract expired. We have been waiting for a decision from the arbitrators for around 6 months now, I think, and hopefully we see something new, or we see something announced soon. Court professionals, in the middle of an existing contract, getting 5.5% for those who are on the chart, 3.5% for those that are off the chart. Social services, which is Teamsters, county detectives, and the telecommunicators are all at 3%. And correctional officers represented by AFSCME are 2% for full-time, 2.5% for the part-timers. Health insurance premiums to the county are increasing by 6.4% for 2017, going from $9.1 million to $9.6 million, almost $9.7 million, a difference of about $580,000. While 6.4% is a higher than inflation number, it is relative to other increases in the industry this year a pretty low number. It's not hard to find 20, 30, and even 40% premium increases out there this year. And so our participation in the Pennsylvania County Health Insurance Pool is proving beneficial, and that has really evened out and kept those increases below what a lot of the industry is seeing. The budget also includes continued funding for significant improvements to the information technology infrastructure. The county continues to move forward with upgrades and standardizing that platform and the applications that go with it. Again, expected to take place over multiple years. We covered this at last year. The tax billing and assessment data program was acquired in 2016. And the first lease payment on that DevNet program is planned for in 2017, and implementation. The next step in the process is to replace the payroll and accounting software. So we have budgeted $250,000 in the 2017 budget to hopefully enter into a lease agreement for that type of software. That remains to be seen for sure, but that's something that's available to us. It's not necessarily an outright purchase of software, but there are some lease options out there. Some counties have seen, I know Controller Metley has done a little research so far, talked to other counties what they've done. This is a very expensive piece of software to acquire. some counties, I think recently you said Lehigh.
Lehigh
County
spent
spent,
roughly 3 million in getting a new system.
Yeah, now that's a county that's, I don't know, I guess
That's with
proportionately 3 times our
purchase and
size. but-
Implementation, so.
So, it remains to be seen the overall cost of that, but if we can enter into a lease, we feel that $250,000 is a good number to get started with that in 2017. And lastly, something new for 2017 and going forward is the creation of a capital project fund. This fund is being created for property maintenance projects, improvements, any acquisitions that may come about, or any other non-routine expenditures that are deemed appropriate. This will be up to the commissioners on what funds are spent and for what out of this fund. This just helps to avoid spikes in the general fund where we might have a $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 expenditure, but it only takes place once. You struggle to come up with that kind of one-time funding, so a capital project fund will help to ease that a bit and make budgeting a little smoother. To initially fund this, we talked about this in the past, we have some health insurance refund set-asides that we have been sitting on for the purposes of any overages or spikes in health insurance claims that we may see. We have that along with some funds on account with Benecon, our health insurance broker. And so I requested of the actuary for Benecon to do a calculation to see what we really actually need in reserves for health insurance claims. And their opinion is that we need approximately $800,000 in reserve. If we keep that, that leaves $1.8 million that we can use otherwise, and so it's my recommendation, I believe the commissioners are agreeable to moving that into a capital project fund to use for those purposes I described. For 2017, we would begin to use this fund for some roof repairs to the municipal building at a cost of $137,000 and some sidewalk repairs and the wheelchair ramp repair at a cost of $65,000. I will just say, as an aside, there is a chance that those roof repairs might be covered under a Honeywell energy savings project once we hear back from Honeywell, if there's a way they can find to save energy, whether it be through insulation, reflective roofing, something like that, in those repairs, then they might be able to fold that into that project and amortize that with the savings in energy, but that remains to be seen. So for now, it's in the capital project fund. And
We have a couple things like parking lot projects and things like that that would be part of this kind of thinking that we should have money aside for.
yeah, there were a couple things deferred this year to look to for next year, and this project fund would be a good place to go for, just like the parking lot.
Most businesses would have a depreciation fund or something similar for capital needs, one-time costs.
The state, Commonwealth had one time they called it their rainy day fund for reference, so there's a number of ways you can label it. So that's my summary, and this budget will be put on display beginning today with your approval, and must be available for 20 days to the public before it can be finally adopted. We do have a meeting advertised and scheduled for December 22nd, which would be the day for final adoption then of this budget.
And it has a balance within the revenues that we generate, so it's a structurally balanced budget. It has allows for cash on hand for us to get through the first quarter of every year without a outside tran. And it also gives us our pension strength, which is another piece of our goal in terms of fiscal management. And throw in the capital fund, and you really have a nice picture of a good, well-run, fiscally run county. So anyway, those are my comments regarding that. We got it right down, trying to focus on retention of employees and so on. That's why even a 3% raise is maybe above the CPI. We still realize that we have retention challenges and we want to be competitive in that area. So we drew down as close as we could to the balance of revenues, but without going beyond that, we have a balanced budget without a tax increase. So.
And that there is a note to what Commissioner Phillips just mentioned. There's a note on page 5 of the larger handout that there's a surplus of about $80,000 of revenues over expenses in this budget. On a $45 million budget, that's a pretty slim margin, but it's structurally balanced.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner?
I'd like to comment. Does Commissioner Litz want to comment first? Or?
She's shaking her head no.
Okay. Well, and there's obviously not a lot more to be said. I think your comments were right on target. I would just like to make a general comment saying that I think all of us on the board and the folks in the department heads and certainly our county administrator collectively, we all should be proud of what we've accomplished fiscally for the county, and we can look back a few years when this board first began managing the county and the situation that we were in, and certainly it goes back a number of years prior to that. So I'm certainly proud, and I think we all can be proud of the fiscal positioning that we're now in with the county.
Thank you. And Bill, I don't know if you mentioned it, I may have drifted on your opening comment, but the effort that the department heads put forth was they were all well prepared and very earnest in their efforts to do the best for their departments, but also keep the bigger picture in mind of the county. So it was a very good exercise by everyone that was involved. Thank you.
And just to piggyback on that, I think that's not something either that happened overnight. That happened over a period of years, I think, under the leadership of this board, that they began to recognize the direction that we were going and became an active part in carrying that out.
So do we need a motion to approve the,
Yes, a motion to tentatively adopt.
oh, I'm sorry, John has a
Oh,
question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Did you mention the reserve fund, which was $8 million?
Yeah.
Is that still?
Yeah, we're not going into that at all. We're not dipping into that at all for any balance, to balance the budget. As I said, there's $80,000 excess of revenues here to balance it. However, it is, and that was touched on in the very beginning here in the Treasurer's report, the reserves are at $7 million after having taken $1 million to pay down the principal on the 2011 bond debt, which was attributable to Cedar Haven. So it's, at this point, it's, if you look at it as a percentage, it's approximately just a little under 10% of the overall budget. Overall budget is $73 million.
Because you started the capital fund with the 1.8 million, was there any consideration of maybe then not really needing that 7? In other words, taking 1.8 million from that 7 together with the capital project, you would still have that comfort level that you wanted.
I think you can add them together as being cash. You could say their total together is cash on hand. However, the 1.8 is being designated as a capital projects fund which can be spent down. If we spend down for projects like that out of the cash reserves, then we'll be dipping into that to balance the budget, which is kind of what got us into an unfavorable status to begin with.
And we
so
think,
it's isolated.
yeah, and just in addition to the use of that money would be replenishable. Our auditors and actuaries tell you have to have cash on hand in order to operate, but also with the situation in Harrisburg, when they have a budget impasse and we have to start funding programs to keep things going in our county, we want to be able to do that without borrowing money, in addition to the first quarter issue of not having tax revenues. So there's a couple of good reasons. Well, in any fiscal management of a business or any enterprise, you need to have cash to operate, and especially when there's revenue issues, so new revenue coming in. So that's part of the other reason why we want to maintain that, and people will vary on what percentage is enough, but certainly having $8 million on a large budget that we have is, I think, within reason.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
So the two together could be,
Yeah.
can be viewed as, cash on hand, however the,
Yeah, the one, I would say, the capital fund, we're gonna spend down over time, but then we're gonna have to replenish that as we can, so that we have a viable capital replacement program going. But the other part of it, I would see as being something we wanna have forever, and, use it and then replenish it when the budget passes or when we get our tax revenues. So that's how I would see the difference of those two.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay? I forget, did we do a motion?
no, not yet. Need a motion to tentatively adopt the budget, put it on display, and come back to it on the 22nd.
Okay. Seek a motion?
I too think that the departments have done a wonderful job in making difficult adjustments when we're being cut. Area Agency and Aging, for example. And Jim Holtree and Children and Youth goes after money, extra money to supplement the budget if indeed we have a high cost placement with juveniles and things like that. I mean, our team is second to none. I really respect each and every one of our department heads and the employees at the County of Lebanon. But when it comes to supporting this budget, I still can't do it because we do not have a written plan for that $7.1 million left over from the sale of Cedar Haven. That money has to be somehow accounted for in a written plan or returned to the taxpayers, in my humble opinion. So for that reason, I cannot make a motion on this budget.
Commissioner Ames, would
All
you?
right, I'll make a motion to tentatively adopt the budget and place it on display.
All right, is there a second? I will second the motion in the absence of Commissioner Litz's second. Any further comment or question? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Aye.
It is a split vote, 2-1, in favor of the motion. We will have a budget that will be on display for next couple weeks, and I appreciate your support of that motion, Bill. Thank you. Anything else, Jamie?
Not on budget, we've got 3 other items on the agenda, and I think Gene Ridenball is